Hello, everybody. Welcome back. You ask and you shall receive. It is Monday morning and we're here with some more scary stories. This is going to be a regular thing for my channel since you guys really enjoyed the last one. We have a story about campgrounds, hitchhikers, strange encounters that may or may not have gotten people kidnapped or neutralized. We have 10 stories for you today. 10. 2 being my personal stories about working in the morgue and performing autopsies. And one of those stories was one of the scariest moments of my life. And I know you're probably like, well, girl, you're kind of scared again. You know, you're paranoid, scared of the dark, scared of the woods. I know. It's crazy to think that somebody that has performed thousands of autopsies, has dissected thousands of people, will be a scaredy cat, but here I am in the flesh and blood, baby. Anyways, you guys, we have 10 stories to get through. Why are we wasting time? Let's get in the mode. Let's freaking go. Don't forget, you guys, you gotta subscribe. You gotta subscribe. Let's go. This is from True Scary Stories 7 days ago. Campground horror. This happened in summer of 2020. I, female 20, at the time, had gone on a trip to Moab, Utah, with my roommate and best friend since high school, Kendall, female 21 at the time. We had last minute joined her family's trip celebrating her sister's high school graduation. We lived a few hours by car from Moab, which had just reopened after being closed to the public due to COVID. They had plans to go skydiving and were excited to tag along. Our plans were to drive separately, stay the night on the couch of her family's Airbnb, go skydiving with them, and then stay the last night at a small cabin in a campground right outside of town, just the two of us, as an added adventure. We had never been on a trip as adults, staying on our own, and were excited to have the independence. Fast forward, we had a great trip down there, as well as a fun first night with Kendall's family. We all went skydiving in the morning early. It was beautiful. After Kendall and I had a huge adrenaline rush and decided to go for a hike to a watering hole. There we explored and even did a small cliff jump into the water. By the end of the day, we were exhausted physically from our activities and from the rush and now drop of adrenaline. We had checked into our campground, which was about 10 miles from the town. There was a general store at the mouth of the property with somewhat unfriendly older cashiers to check us in, but we didn't think much of it. The campground was made of different sections for tents, RVs, and small cabins. When I say small cabins, I mean room for 2 twin beds and a chair and hardly anything else. We stayed in one of those. Like I said, Moab had just reopened to tourists, so besides us, we saw one other family of 3 staying in the entire campground. We also noticed we didn't have a cell phone signal in the camp. Remember that. By nightfall, we could hardly move our bodies. We were so sore and spent about an hour in camp chairs under the stars drinking a few Mike's Hards. Before I knew it, I realized we had had a little too much for being in an unfamiliar place on our own, but shook it off. We decided to call it a night and grabbed our lantern to head to the communal bathrooms to wash our faces. Also, I'll add now that Kendall had sprained her ankle a month prior to this and was wearing a boot on her right leg. Yes, she went skydiving and hiking with us. We were young and eager to get out after lockdown, but she was unable to drive with the angle her foot needed to be at to brake safely, so I had been doing all the driving. We made our way to the bathroom, giggling through the pitch dark with our light. We reached the hut that held the 4 separated bathrooms. Each had a shower directly across from the door, and a toilet and sink against on side walls. We swung the door open, eager to get out of the dark, and flipped the switch on. I entered the room first and immediately stopped in my tracks. Kendall stopped in the doorway. We both were silent. There was something off. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like an intense feeling something was wrong. We stared forward at the shower, which had the curtain half drawn closed. There was some kind of short stepping stool in the middle of the shower, with the front 2 legs poking out from behind the curtain. My eyes started to rise, and I could just make out the faint silhouette of a person standing on the stool behind the thin curtain. We stood there frozen in shock, confusion, and disbelief. There couldn't be someone hiding behind that curtain like a scary movie. Suddenly, Kendall broke the silence. What's that? I looked to my right where the sink was. Propped on the sink against the mirror was an iPhone with the screen facing us. The camera was out and recording. That snapped me out of my trance. I shouted, "Nope," and we both turned around and basically ran back to our cabin. We locked the door and tried to figure out what we just walked into. We couldn't call anyone because we had no signal, and this was our first time staying somewhere new on our own. I had been drinking and didn't feel confident that I could drive through the rocks and sharp turns and make it back to the highway. We tried to calm ourselves down, talk our way out of what we saw. We turned the lights off because I couldn't get the image of someone looking through the small one window of the door leading into our cabin. We were all alone in this campground, completely exhausted physically from our skydive and hiking. I know it sounds dumb, but at the time we were so confused and tired, and we just decided to go to sleep and leave first thing in the morning. We pushed our beds together and lay there in the dark in silence. I started to think about the staff who worked at the campground, and if they, knowing it was almost empty, had been the one in the bathroom, or if we were just mistaken in what we saw. About 10 minutes into laying there, Kendall said, "You know what's weird?" I froze, waiting to hear something to add to this horrible situation. She told me about earlier when she had gone to take a shower, how she looked up and saw a blinking blue light in the vent above the shower. I didn't say anything. We left in the morning and never spoke about any of it again. Honestly, I know we didn't handle the situation well. Please don't get on me in the comments. If it had happened now, there's no way we wouldn't have reported it. But we were young and scared. We didn't know how to process what was happening. I still don't know really what happened. Anyways, we never stayed there again. Sorry it was so long. Kinda relived it while writing it. I would've pooped my pants. Oh my gosh, that scary scarcity. Maybe he was fixing the camera in the shower and he walked in. I don't know. Let's go to another one. This is a post from Casual Conversations 1 year ago. Commenter: in my mid-20s, female, I moved to a new state and needed to buy a used car. In those days, you had to look in the newspaper for listings. So I called a few options and finally spoke to a very nice woman about a car she was selling. She wanted to meet in a parking lot she said was close to where she worked, not too far away, so I used my brother's car to go and meet her. I arrived to an empty parking lot where she and a man were there waiting for me. She was a dowdy woman in her early 30s, and he was a regular looking man in his mid 40s. At the time, I was young and optimistic, so the danger didn't hit me until I was in the back of the car to take it for a test run through an industrial park. We drove past a building where the woman mentioned she worked, but her tone was so unbelievable. I knew I was in a very bad situation. I was sitting in the middle of the back seat and saw her reach carefully into her purse for what I immediately knew was a gun. She glanced at him with her hand in the bag, and he gave her the slightest nod, no, and her hand slid back out of her purse and rested next to it. At that moment, I kicked into some sort of extreme self-preservation mode and started chatting non-stop friendly and talking all about my life, such as my father being a big lawyer and how close I was to my family, and how my mom was so awesome, how fortunate I was to be so loved, and how I had so many friends and prospects in the city, and what our plans were for right after I finished here, and so on and on. A lot of this was embellished to make me sound loved and needed, as in people would be looking for me. We get to the end of this road, have seen no one so far, and we switched to me being in the front seat with the woman with the gun in the back seat. I understood my life was literally dangling, and I kept up the friendly stream of chatter. I can't remember all that was said, but at one point the man literally asked me if I would be missed if I was gone, if my mother would miss me if I was gone. Like, WTF. Again, I dive deep into all the people whom I love and how deeply I would be missed. We get back to my car and get out. He pulls open the hood and starts saying car stuff. I'm still friendly and smiling and nonchalant. I realize I still may or may not make it out. We chat a little more about the car, and I wind things down and say I have to go now as my brother is waiting. So freaky as it was, he goes to my driver's door and opens it for me. To get in, I have to slide past him inches from him. As I glance to give him a big smile and thank you, his face had contorted into a manic frenzy. I see he's on the absolute edge of controlling his impulses. I literally see I have seconds before he breaks and has to act. I get in, I shut the door and leave. What I saw in that one glance on his face was that he wanted to do things with my body, not my live body. That he was a serial killer and killed women like I brush my teeth. It was so wildly unbelievable. I told my friends and family about it, and everyone kind of told me I was exaggerating. I became a more careful person after this, and life went on, but I always knew how extreme the danger I was in, and I knew exactly what that man was all about, and that I wasn't wrong in what I saw. About 8 years later, I was living in Europe and watching the news at my father-in-law's house, and there on the TV was that man's face. He had been caught, and he was the Green River Killer. It's believed he is the most prolific killer in the US. What he actually confessed to was a mere fraction of the victims he had. He would take vacations up and down the West Coast. That was the scariest encounter of my life, but it didn't quite end there. I had a boyfriend of 8 years prior to moving to the new city. I hadn't been in contact with him for over 20 years. When we got back in contact, it turned out his partner after me of 18 years was the only survivor of Gary Ridgway. He sliced the front of her open from bottom to top and left her for dead in the woods. She miraculously survived and went on to live a happy, productive life. Gary was posing working as a taxi driver at the time he was abducted. I honestly believe that people have this way of pushing down events that happen when they hear about them to kind of make their fears at ease. And I think that's what people were thinking when she told them about this story. Because obviously, you don't want to think that there's a serial killer in your town or there's somebody posing as something they're not to try and catch you off guard. This kind of thing is so scary, especially when you're young. We probably come in contact with scary people in our everyday to day life, and we have no freaking idea. Casual conversation 1 year ago. What's the scariest encounter you ever had with other humans or otherwise? Commenter, I'll start with mine. I was 13 years old, making roughly 1/3 mile walk up the dirt road to my friend's house. I had done this many times over the years, and since we lived out in the sticks, you'd think the main thing to watch out for would be moose, bears, or mountain lions. Nope, my sketchiest encounter here involved other humans. So anyways, back to my walk. I had my bike with me, but was walking with it since the road goes uphill. Everything was normal until a car that I didn't recognize turned and drove up the road. I moved to the side, of course, assuming it was going to drive past me, but no, it slowed down, kind of pulled to the side behind me, and it followed me up the road, rolling at the same speed I was walking. I started getting nervous. Eventually a passenger, a guy in a hoodie, steps out of the car and walks alongside it, looking at me while continuing to follow. At this point, I'm actually scared. See, I was a tiny 13-year-old, could easily pass 4, and was often mistaken as a younger child. If these guys wanted to do something to me, they easily could have. I started walking faster. Car and guy keep up. I then hop on my bike and started pedaling as fast as I can. At this point, I don't look back until I finally reach my friend's driveway. The car and the guy stopped, and after a moment, the guy got back in the car and they turned around and left. I ran to the house and tried to tell my friend's parents about it, but they didn't take me seriously. At least I got them to give me a ride back because I was scared to make the walk again. My parents weren't home, but I never saw that car or that guy with it again. Looking back, I might have been very lucky that day. Worst case scenario, these guys may have been actual kidnappers looking for a victim to nab. If that were the case, I wonder what stopped them from just grabbing me. Maybe they were just a couple punks looking to scare somebody. Either way, it's probably the only thing from my childhood that's almost scarier to look back on. I know a lot of people probably see these kind of stories and they're like, oh, I mean, that's not that scary. But in that situation, I'm sure her heart was like going insane. Oh, I'm about to be kidnapped. I'm about to be kidnapped. I mean, for me, that's terrifying because you never really know people's intentions until they do it. You can kind of feel when something's just not right. You can feel if somebody has malicious intent or not. You can feel it. Let's go to another one. This one's from Ask Reddit 4 years ago. What is the scariest true story you know? Commenter, long story. I have never shared this story that I can remember. It sometimes gives me nightmares. Maybe if I share it, I can let some of it go. It's a very long story. I worked as a temp when I was first out of college, about 30 years ago. As someone who temps knows, it's a very diverse pool of people you come across as coworkers. One coworker of mine was a woman from another state. I won't mention names or states, so any details are changed for for reasons that will be obvious. She was an older lady, and she was missing an eye. She did not have an artificial eye, just no eye. I'll call her Grace. Grace confided in me one day that she had lost her eye during a carjacking in a major metropolitan city. She had been shot 3 times, and she said her husband was in the military, and was overseas in combat. He would be coming home from tour and retiring after this tour. She regularly sent him care packages of personal supplies and food. She had an adult daughter, but her daughter was estranged and she didn't speak to her often. Grace was always lecturing me to call your mom, it means a lot. She bought a new SUV when her husband's military pay came. He had told her to get one as soon as it came in. It was pretty nice, nicer than any vehicle I ever could afford. I visited her house a couple of times. She had a large parrot that talked. She said it missed her husband terribly. And sometimes when she let it out of its cage, she would tease him and say, "Where's Papa?" And the bird would go looking around for him. Although she was a little odd. I figured I would be too if the things that had happened to her happened to me. But some of the things she said sometimes threw me off a little. And I started getting some spidey sense feelings once in a while. One day I was reading the news online and there was an article about an inmate at the state corrections prison who was suing the state for maltreatment. I think I read it 3 or 4 times because something seemed familiar to me about the name. At first I thought maybe I'd heard about the story before, but when I got to work the next day, it struck me that the name was Grace's husband's name. It was a fairly unusual name. I kept it to myself though, because who knows? There could be more than one person by that name, but it kept bugging me. One day near the holidays, she said he was coming home for leave, and she was excited to see him. She would have to drive far upstate to the base he was stationed from. I was so glad for her, and it seemed like the person in the paper was someone else entirely. After the holidays, he went back to the Middle East. Things went back to normal, but Grace started getting really stressy, saying he might have to stay after this tour as well. They needed the money because temping wasn't making enough, and the military offers a lot to stay in. She was hoping he would not have to. She began giving me gifts, both of food and trinkets. I usually have a suspicion of gifts, and I associate them with someone trying to make up for something. I know it's a pessimistic outlook, but it's rooted in my childhood. Anyway, it made my senses tingle again. I started turning down the gifts at one point. I also did not feel comfortable visiting her anymore. She just began to unsettle me. As spring came, I was reading the news and I saw the follow-up for the story about the prisoner, and I got curious, so I looked up the entire lawsuit. He had gotten a 6-figure settlement, but was still not getting out. The internet was not what it is today, and searching for people online was pretty rudimentary, but court cases were available and came up pretty quick in search engines. As I read the entire transcript, I was horrified to find out that the man who was suing for maltreatment was a child. He had been in prison for over 20 years, and his parole was denied because he was listed as dangerous and violent. As I browsed the legal site, I came across some of his earlier court proceedings. Apparently, he had had years added to his sentence because when one of his victims was about 5, his girlfriend had brought her in for visitation and had helped him get away with her in the jail visitation room. He had gotten caught. She somehow escaped criminal charges, but they took the child away. I still had no proof that this was Grace's husband, but I was so freaked out by the story and had nightmares for several nights in a row about what I read. And working with Grace became excruciatingly hard. Things that never alarmed me before began actually frightening me. One day she left for lunch and wanted to go somewhere in her vehicle, but I said I brought lunch and wanted to stay at work. She seemed overly cranky about it. After lunch, I was working for an hour when I realized she hadn't returned from lunch. Supervisors began asking me if I knew where she went. I said I didn't, but I hoped she hadn't gotten in an accident or something. At break time, I went for a walk, which I usually went on with Grace. She still was not back. As I went around the corner, she pulled up in an SUV. I told her I was worried something had happened and that the supervisors were asking about her. She was angry and said I should have covered for her better. I was kind of offended. She then told me to get in the vehicle, that she would give me a ride back to work. I told her I would just walk back. It was just around the block, for heaven's sake. She suddenly yelled at me, "Why won't you get in the car? Just get in." I was like, "No thanks, I will meet you back there." When she finally got into the office, she sat down in a low voice said, "Why won't you ride in the car with me? Why are you refusing to come to my house? I know something is wrong. What is the problem?" I said there's no problem. What could be the problem? There's no problem. She said, "Oh, there's a problem," under her breath. The supervisor came over and asked to talk to her, and she was let go. She told me I should have covered for her. Not really in my nature unless there is something life or death though. Then she left angry. The supervisor saw her yell at me, and then they talked to me. They said not to feel bad. They had let her go for other reasons. She had falsified information on her entrance paperwork, and it was some serious stuff. I was like, was it about her background? And they said, yeah. Did you know about her husband? And I said, I thought he was overseas. They just shook their head. I didn't ask, and they didn't tell me anymore. For years after, even after I married and changed my name and moved all over creation, I was still fearful of her and the husband, because it turns out it was him, and he was the one who had her. And even though he did that and harmed children, she was still faithful to him. I kept an eye on his sexual offender status for years. One day he was paroled, so he was actually out there somewhere. Terrifying. But one year when I searched his status, it said he was no longer registered as an offender because he was deceased. I had never looked Grace up, but when I did, I saw she was deceased as well. No clue how either one died. Just saw the death notices. I hope their child or children are okay somewhere. I can't imagine being a close family member to those two. I sometimes wonder what might have happened the day she wanted me to get in her vehicle. Even back then, I had read enough true crime to know some possible outcomes. Wow. I'm gonna be honest. The end of that story where you heard that they were deceased kind of seems like a blessing. I know that's effed up, but anybody who's a predator like this and condones predatory behavior like this, they don't deserve to breathe the same air as me and you. They are a menace to society, and they shouldn't be accepted, period. So that was terrifying. I don't know what would have happened if you got in that car. I really don't. You might not be standing here right now. You might not have been able to write that story. That is some scary shiz. Let's go to another one. This is from Creepy Encounters 3 months ago. I think someone was in my house when I was a child. This is a story I haven't told anyone except my family, but it's been bothering me for years. When I was a child, our family home was divided into 3. One for my uncle and his 2 children, another for my mother and me, and the third, which stood empty after my great-grandfather died. It was a large, ugly house that had been targeted by burglars before. The first time was before I was born. The second time, I was 5 and slept through it. Another time, someone drunk was walking around our garden and rearranging things. Or every day around 3 or 4 a.m., they were standing in front of our fence and looking into the windows. When I was 7 years old, things calmed down a bit. My drunk neighbor went to jail, and with him, many of these types of incidences disappeared. I remember it was a big event because my family finally allowed themselves to have animals. A neighbor was attacking other people's animals. We got 3 cats and a dog from a shelter. The other neighbors became calmer too, but I still felt uncomfortable. I was a nervous and fearful child, and after all these stories, I didn't like being left alone at the house. So there was an unspoken agreement that if my uncle or cousins were leaving the house for a moment, they couldn't tell me, so I didn't have to be afraid. Unfortunately, my cousin, then 23, came to see how I was doing one day. We chatted for a while, and then she told me she was going to the shop. Of course, I panicked. I didn't want to go with her, but I didn't want to stay either, so I started crying. It ended with my cousin letting me go to her room and watch cartoons, which was a pretty big deal, because she was the only one with so many channels on TV. Her room was on the ground floor, and had a window onto the neighbor's garden, who had a barbecue at the time. I remember she used that as another argument. If anything happens, open the window and shout to them. Then she left and I focused on the cartoons. I remember I had already watched an entire episode of Dexter's Laboratory and had switched to the channel that had the Barbie movie on when I heard some sounds. At first I assumed it was our pets, but the next sounds were more like footsteps, door opening, etc. My cousin came back from the shop, but I didn't even finish watching Barbie. I remember being more angry than scared at this point and decided to be quiet. So maybe it would take her a while before she threw me out of her room. But the noise was really annoying. Lots of footsteps, shuffling, and some barking from our dog. At one point, the sounds were close to the room. My cousin had a door with a window back then. One of those where you can barely see anything, only see shadows. So when I turned around, all I saw was a figure in a gray and black outfit. Nothing special, no bright colors. It was hard to tell if it was even a man or a woman. So I once again assumed it was my cousin and decided to stay quiet, hoping she wouldn't come in. But even I was starting to feel uncomfortable because this person was standing there and doing nothing in the front door. Finally, the person turned right into the kitchen and I went back to watching cartoons. Only shortly after, what everyone probably expected happened. I heard our front door open and a loud, "I'm back!" from my cousin. This time, I also heard the sound of plastic bags. I remember suddenly being completely terrified. But before I did anything, my cousin went to the kitchen and nothing happened. No screaming, no fighting. I literally sat in her room, now with the cartoon sound turned off, listening, but it all sounded like normal unpacking of groceries. Then my cousin came over and I started crying. I ended up telling her what happened and she called neighbors. Together they searched the entire house, but they found no one. Nothing looked damaged, and in the next days, nothing had disappeared from our house. The rest of the family found out too. We confirmed that my uncle and mother were at work and my second cousin was at school. The day it happened, we found our cat sleeping in my great-grandfather's apartment on the second floor, but the dog was nervous and spent the entire search around the neighbors and whining. We never managed to solve it. But when I spoke with my cousin recently, she admitted that she spoke to my uncle about a few years after the event, and together they came to the conclusion that I must have imagined something. But I am 100% certain that I saw a person that day. Oh, that would scare the shit out of me. I was a very, I still am, very paranoid kid, and this would... I feel like if you're scared to be alone, maybe there's a bad energy in the area. Maybe there is something and you just can't see it. I'm not this spiritual person that's into rocks and things like that. And death is a very real thing and we don't know what happens. Of course, we have our speculations, we have our religions, we have our thoughts, and there's some people, even my mom. My mom was pronounced when she was a little kid and she claimed to have seen the tunnel to heaven and has also went to hell. And it's one of those things where to think that there isn't spirits among us is kind of ignorant in a way. Believe what you want. I don't really care. You can believe what you want, but the whole exorcism thing and things like that, I think they're real. I think people really do get demon possessed, whether it's minor, whether it's a complete takeover, because those recordings of people that have been possessed are terrifying and they speak Latin and it's a lot. I know that's different. A demon and a spirit is completely different, but you get the drift I'm trying to throw out. When I was a kid, my mom, I hated it so much, but I acted so grateful. I was like, oh my God, thank you. But my mom used to buy me these porcelain dolls. I'll show some pictures. These aren't my actual porcelain dolls. These are a example. My mom would buy me these porcelain dolls, and I probably had 20 of them. So my bed, when you're looking at the room, it was these shelves, and then my bed was in the middle of the shelves. They were lined with these porcelain dolls. They gave me the fucking creeps. I hated them. Half the time, I'd sleep on the couch because I'm like, I don't even want to be in that room with them things. They gave me this really weird vibe. And this could have been because I put them up there weird. I don't know. But there had been handfuls of times me and my friend Ashley are on the couch. We're just, we're watching our TV show and we'd hear a from my bedroom and we're like, hell no, no. And we'd go in there. Oh my gosh, my heart would be pumping out of my chest. I'm like, if there is a doll on this floor, my brother in Christ, I'm going to cry. And every single time, there would be one or two of these dolls just face down on the floor. I'm like, bro, I am never sleeping in my room again. Ever. Eventually, I told my mom that they scared the shit out of me. We put them in their boxes because we kept the boxes, and we shoved them all in my closet. So instead, I just felt like something was watching me all the time. And they would still, I swear to God, I'm not lying, they would still end up, somehow when I'd open my closet door, they'd fall down. Like they got bumped over and they're like leaning on the door. So when I opened it, they were like, I do not like dolls. They scare the shit out of me. Dolls and Furbies. Furbies? Oh my God. Who created Furbies? They need to be in jail. Think about and shit, like start talking to you in the middle of the night, you know what I mean? Oh God. Them things they just had a bad energy when you held them. Like, why do you feel like this? Why do you look like that? Ugh. Let's go to another one. My first date as an adult was zero dating experience. I was smoking with this guy I just met. He picked me up and he handed me the blunt. I noticed he wasn't really smoking it. He stopped at Wawa for gas and offered me a drink. I declined. Just a few minutes of driving and he pulls over, and a man walks up to the driver's side. He claims it's his cousin, and he said he wanted to hang out with him and offered me to go back to his place and hang out with the both of them. I said no thank you, and he took me home. Next thing I know, I was so drugged up I could barely make it off the couch. Someone had to take care of me. I was so fucked up. Clearly the weed was laced and they had plans for me, but he ended up just taking me home. I never confronted him, just blocked him, and like 2 years later he randomly messaged me on my PS4 saying he moved to the area. So that's not the story, but there's a comment to that, and this is the story. Commenter: this happened to me before, except I actually made it inside the guy's house, where he eventually offered me a fresh, cold water bottle. I'd say I'm someone who's very cautious. As someone who lived in my car in Hollywood for 6 years, I felt I was able to read creepy vibes quite well. But this dude, he was literally just a normal guy. He must have been an absolute pro at this, because he genuinely seemed like a sweet, friendly dude. We'd actually been talking over chat for a few weeks and had a mutual friend, so felt pretty comfortable with him. I didn't think about it until way after the fact, but he opened the water bottle for me. He walked over to the kitchen while sitting on the couch, presumably spiked the water in the kitchen, closed the cap, then pretended to crack the cap open in front of me. Or maybe even had the drink prepared way ahead of time, because it all happened very quick. It was a really hot summer LA day, so I was honestly happy to have a nice cold water, and like an absolute idiot, chugged that bitch down at least halfway. He gave this weird look of shock. I don't know. He kind of quickly opened his eyes all wide and had a very slight look of worry. Now that I think back on it, I don't think he expected me to drink that much in one gulp. Who knows? Maybe he expected me to take a small gulp and pass out quickly. He might have been worried it was gonna kill me or something. I asked what was that look for, but he quickly laughed it off and said something like, "I'm sorry, didn't think you were that thirsty. I would have gotten you a drink a long time ago." We had been sitting in his house for about 35-45 minutes already. At this point, I remember we were just chilling and hanging out in the living room watching TV. He was on his computer and asked if I wanted to see something cool. He proceeded to show me the dark web and started bragging about how he bought weird shit on there all the time. Scared emoji. I was honestly very intrigued. Had never seen the dark web up close, so I started browsing through all the fucking weird shit on there. So at this point, I started feeling weird. I can't even explain it, but the feeling was definitely a slow burn type feeling. I was just very, very dizzy, lightheaded, and tired. Everything felt slowed down by 30%. But I was still somehow 1000% mentally coherent. I thank my very, very slow metabolism for this. I just got this horrible feeling in my gut that I fucking knew he had drugged me, and I knew I had to get out of there ASAP. I tried to just keep calm and explain to him that, oh my god, I totally forgot. I have something in my car that I wanted to show you. At this point, he was trying to get closer and closer to me, started putting his arm around me, and was begging me to just come cuddle with him, that we could go find it later. I insisted it was a special surprise, and I really, really wanted to show him. I promise we can cuddle for the rest of the day when we get back. It'll only be a minute. I started walking to the door, and he followed closely, playfully, tugged at my arm to not leave. He kept saying, "Really? I just wanted to relax with you. I just don't feel like going back out there. It's too hot outside." I insisted, "It's okay, just stay here then. I'll be right back." I genuinely believe my pure adrenaline kept me focused enough to get out that day. He ended up huffing, puffing, and ended up insisting he'll walk me out to the car. He sort of held my lower back butt area, so he led me out the front door. I started quickly quickly devising a plan in my head. My body felt so slow, but my mind and heart were racing so fast. As he walked out, I held my keys tightly in my hand. I secretly pressed the lock button and heard a very faint beep sound from the distance. I knew that my door automatically unlocks with the fob, so was trying to ensure all the other doors were locked in case he tried to pull something. As we approached my car, I told him to wait right there on the sidewalk, that I was just going to grab the surprise from the trunk and grab my charger while we're there. I tried very hard to maintain a fun, cute, playful demeanor. He insisted he has a charger I can use. I insisted back that I have a special fast charging C-type charger. I went around to the driver's side. The door quickly unlocked just as I had planned, and don't think I've ever closed a door behind me so quick. I quickly used my keys to lock all the doors again. He stepped into the passenger window and asked me what the fuck I was doing. He looked scared and mad. Before even giving an answer, I quickly drove off. I legitimately do not remember anything past this point. All I know is that I was later awoken in my car by the cops. I was parked at a nearby McDonald's. Apparently someone called him to complain about a young girl falling asleep in the drive-through line. When I was awoken, I was safely parked in the McDonald's parking lot. Somehow parked perfectly in the lines and everything. Oh God. I sincerely do not remember going through the drive-through or even arriving at McDonald's. It's honestly a miracle I didn't crash, hurt someone, or even scratch the car. The cops pulled me out, searched me, and found a small baggie stuffed into my back pocket with an unknown substance. Bruh, this psycho, he planted fucking drugs on me. And I'm almost 100% certain he did it when he was grabbing my lower back butt as he escorted me out the door. I think he knew I was trying to leave, and I assume he needed a cover for himself. I guess to make me look like a druggie instead of an actual victim of the date drug. He knew I was gonna pass out somewhere and get in trouble. Holy fuck. To make a long story short, that's how I ended up in jail and got my life destroyed after some psycho drugged me. Also, the cops did not believe a word that I said after they found that miscellaneous bag, even though it was literally a small speckle in there. Later in court, found out it was fentanyl. It honestly seemed to be game over for me. In court, I got to watch myself sleeping in the drive-thru, wake up, then somehow, very skillfully might I add, park my vehicle perfectly in the lines of the same McDonald's parking lot. I actually went directly to the hospital after I got released from jail, fucking jail, and got proof of GHB in my system, a very potent amount of GHB in my system. I could not provide a full name and address or find this guy's exact apartment. So apparently to the court system, it didn't happen. He never gave me an address and met me outside that day. He also lived in these apartments that were ultra confusing and everything looked the same. Oh, and that mutual friend we had refused to speak to me ever again or give me any information. In court, they proceeded to say that GHB is abused all the time by junkies. LOL. Yep, to this day, I still can't believe any of that happened to me. Holy shit. This is terrifying. See, sometimes my paranoia makes sense. Cause yikes. Your instincts were like, girl, get out. Run. You are feeling weird. Something's wrong. Something's up. Because a lot of people probably just sit there and let it ride and not realize. Like, oh, maybe it's just in my head. Maybe I'm just being insane. Let me just ride it out. Maybe it'll go away. Thank God, OP, because who knows? Who knows what would have happened? I will say, though, the court system is an absolute joke. You can tell the courts till you're black and blue that they're wrong, that they need to believe you. Everything is not black and white, but the court system sees everything as black and white, especially if this is not your first charge. They want your ass in trouble. They want you, well, they want me behind bars. They really do. Because, boy, oh my God. We're not going to get into that right now, but I do my best to not get pulled over. Because I know almost every time I get pulled over, my ass goes to jail. Let's go to another one. Don't pick up hitchhikers. I was going to post this in creepy encounters, but I think it may tread the line with this group. So here I am. I, female 52, at the time was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I was stopped at a popular and busy gas station travel stop. Okay, it was a Buc-ee's. To fill up the car, stretch my legs, use the restroom, and grab a snack. I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was looking for a ride to a town a couple towns over. Her ride had abandoned her while she was in the restroom. She was a little upset. she didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone numbers so I could call someone for her. I checked with the employees at the store and they said that she had been there for an hour looking for a ride because she said her friends left her while she was in the restroom. I then made the decision to do something I've never done before: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town she wanted to go to, but I was heading in that direction, and I told her I could drop her off at the grocery store in the next town where I would be turning off to go to my destination. The grocery store was always busy, and it was very likely she'd have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted to go. Also, she'd been 5 miles away where she wanted to go instead of 25, and she'd had an easier time walking that distance if she had to. This was agreeable to her, and we set off. Right away, I noticed a van was following us. I tried to lose the van, but it kept pace. Meanwhile, the woman wanted to play with my phone. I told her no, it wasn't a toy. It was for work, and I moved it out of reach. The van speeds up and starts getting closer. The woman suddenly remembers her boyfriend's phone number, and we need to call him. I can't use my phone while driving. This was a pre-car sync voice activated operation, and I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of next town, and no cell phone use while driving signs everywhere. I told her, we're almost to the grocery store. We can call him from the parking lot. She becomes agitated and yells, no, you need to take me home. I told her I can't do that. I'm not going there. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We'll call him from the parking lot. She becomes more upset and frustrated. The van is getting closer. I pulled into the grocery store parking lot. It's about 4 p.m. The grocery store is busy. I pull up in front of the store and ask for her boyfriend's number. She can't remember his number. She won't get out of the car. She's arguing with me, and the van is pulling into the parking lot. There is a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, and I roll down my window and signal that I need to speak to him. He walks over and asks what's going on. I tell him where I met the woman, and now she won't get out of my car. And under my breath, I tell him the van has been following us. The deputy tells the woman, she brought you where you asked her to. It's time for you to leave her car now. She slowly gets out of the car, and I ask once more for her boyfriend's number. She says, you're crazy. I don't have a boyfriend. Oh, look, there are my friends now. And she points to the damn van. The deputy and I share a look, and he says, give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. You get out of here, and I'll check on you before my shift is over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers. I left and went on to my destination. He called me to make sure I go to where I was going and told me that they were keeping an eye on the van and its owner. He told me he also contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working, and that she would contact me in a day or two. While I was on assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the woman and the van. No one ever told me anything about them, but they were very interested in them. My nightmare is one day I'll turn on a true crime show and see a report about this woman and her gang robbing and killing people. So, women looking for a ride at a travel stop, let's not meet again. I think it is a cardinal rule to never pick up a hitchhiker. I have heard countless stories of people getting very harmed, if not neutralized, from picking up hitchhikers. I know. There is some people that truly just want to ride. It ain't worth it, baby. No, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. You will never catch me picking up a hitchhiker. Honestly, you'll never catch me letting somebody use my phone. I know, that's fucked up, but you're not gonna catch me slipping. You're not. I'm gonna let you use my phone. Somebody's gonna come up behind me and take my ass. Now, I am a very strong person, like really strong, but everybody is weak when they are caught off guard. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't care. If you are not paying attention, done. Guys, don't pick up hitchhikers. Just don't do it. Just literally don't do it. Don't ever do it. If somebody wants a ride, maybe just give them some money and be like, get on the bus. I'm not taking you anywhere. Sorry. And I have had friends that have hitchhiked across the country. And I'm like, 1, you're stupid. 2, those people are stupid for picking your ass up. This world is too dangerous. Something touched my hand. This happened a long time ago. I'm close to 50 now, and I was around 16 at the time, but I've never forgotten the feeling. I still get the urge to pull my hand towards myself and shiver when I think about it. I lived with my parents and younger brother on a small anchorage about a half-hour drive from town. Not too far from our neighbors, but enough to have privacy. It was early in the morning, and I was home alone, still sleeping like only teenagers can do, when I had a dream that my house was surrounded by beings. Not aliens or anything, but what seemed like almost humans. I could see them, but I knew that they were there, trying to see me. In my dreams, they were annoyed and curious and peeking in between cracks in the curtains whenever they could. The next bit, I really don't know if I was still dreaming or awake, but I walked down the short hall and looked toward the back door. I turned left out of my room, 4 or 5 steps down the hall, stopped, turned to the right, and froze. There was a railing there and looked over it. There was the bottom of the basement steps. The steps going up from there led to a small landing where the back door was, so a direct line of sight to the door. I can still see it, plain as anything. A brown door with little yellow curtains on a small square window. The curtains that tanned skin. The curtains that my parents never closed were, as usual, wide open, and there was a face glaring at me from outside. A man, tan skin, and a braid going down both bare shoulders, glaring like he absolutely hated me and would definitely hurt me. It looked like an indigenous man, but I knew it wasn't really that somehow. This is part of why I'm not sure if I was awake or not. It seemed like at the exact time I looked into his eyes, I felt a smooth, firm stroke across the palm of my hand and jolted awake and jumped out of bed and was looking out that window. I can never really decide if I was already looking at the door before the touch or after, but I know that my hand was touched and I know it was done to wake me up. I've never had a dream or experience of being touched like that again. The touch didn't scare me as much as the face glaring at me, but it was just wrong, like something that should have never happened but somehow did. Other stuff happened there, but nothing that odd. Still bugs me at times though. I was reading these and I'm gonna tell my own personal scary story from working at the morgue. Still to this day, I can feel the feeling I felt when this happened. At the morgue, you have to get every deceased person's fingerprints. One of the detectives brought back fingerprints and they were like, hey, can you guys redo these? They aren't good enough. Everybody was busy and it was one of my days where I'm not doing autopsies, I'm just helping out. I'm like, I'll do it, it's fine. We had 2 coolers, and this cooler, you'd go out and you'd walk down, it's almost like it's a block away, but it's in the same fenced area. So I walk down to this other cooler and it's just me. I open the cooler and I'm finding the body. At the morgue that I worked at, we had like 20 bodies a day. We had so many people. This cooler that I walk into, there's wall mounts and then there's like rolling autopsy beds that you can just kind of place people on until the funeral home or wherever they're going, the person can pick them up. It's full. It's so full. The walls are full. There's probably 8 or 9 carts in the middle of the cooler. So it's a little difficult to maneuver around in this cooler. And the lights in this cooler are motion activated. This is important. I find the body and she's in a body bag. I unzip her. I pull her hands out, just her hands. When you're finding the other hand, you have to kind of get in there and like you're hovering over the body and you're pulling it out. Anyways, I do her left hand. Cool, whatever. I'm not in there very long. I don't know how long the timer is on these lights, but it's not long enough. I go to the hand that's like this over her body. So my arm is kind of resting on her freezing body and I'm holding it and I'm doing the fingerprints. So her hand is like this in my hand. You know, I'm basically holding hands with this woman. And as I'm doing this, the lights turn on. And this is a cooler. There's no windows. There's not even a speck of light. And when I tell you, my heart hit the floor. I thought I was going to throw up. I was so scared. I am in the dark with 50 bodies. And I'm holding one of their hands. And I swear to God, I know it's probably in my brain. I know I'm probably imagining it. But I could almost swear I felt a tense up, her grab my hand when the light went out. And I'm sure it's in my head. I'll tell myself it's in my head until the day I die. But I look up and I'm doing this. You know, I'm trying to get the light back on. I'm freaking the fuck out. I'm like, oh, please turn on. I'm about to start crying. I'm like, please turn on. So I kind of lightly put her hand down and I'm like waving because like I said, it's kind of hard to obstacle. The only thing that I can see is the door handle is lime green and lit up because it's glow in the dark, because that's how you get out. I start feeling around because it's like the darkest you've ever seen anything dark. I'm like pushing bodies because they're on wheels, pushing them out of my way to get to the door. And I have tunnel vision at this point because I'm so fucking scared, because I am scared of the dark. I'm like breathing so heavy. The door will not open. It will not open. I'm like pushing this button with all of my might, pushing my back on this freezer door. And I'm pushing it and I'm pushing it and it will not open. And so I'm like internally dying. And I just sit there and I take a breath and I'm like, maybe I'm not opening it right. And then all of a sudden, it opens from the outside. This guy that I worked with, he had opened the door and I immediately bolt out and I was like, I'm not doing these fingerprints. Somebody else has to finish them. Because at this point, I'm like, and my adrenaline is rushing and I almost feel like I'm going to pass out because I have tingling in my brain. And the lights turn on, you know, because the door opened, there was movement. But why did the lights not turn on when I'm trying to get to the door? I'm waving. I'm like, what the actual fuck? And the guy, he's like, they're all dead. It's okay. You couldn't have been in a safer place. I'm like, do you hear what you just said? You're with 50 bodies in the dark and you're stuck. Yeah, it's probably safe because they're... But my brain is thinking, okay, well, you know, this is the start of a horror movie. I'm going to open this door and I'm going to turn around and they're all going to be sitting up. You know what I mean? Or they're all going to be standing there looking at me. Oh my gosh, it was terrifying. I have so many scary stories from that place. Oh my God. Let's just do another one. And this one's short. In the mornings, you know, we have to stage the bodies. We pull them all out of the cooler. I was always one of the first people to get there. So I would pull all the bodies out and put them in the autopsy room. Because we had one big room and it had 5 stations. So we pull them all out, put the bags for all their belongings with their number and stuff on each thing, get them ready for pictures, blah, 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 blah. So I go to the cooler, which is attached to the autopsy room. I open it and oh my God, I thought I saw God for a second. I opened the door and I'm by myself at this point. There's detectives in the building next to us, but I'm in the morgue by myself and you'd hear weird shit all the time. Anyways, getting off track. So I open this door. This old man is like this. And I've only seen this once. He's like this. Sitting straight up like this. And he has his head turned just a little bit to the point where it looks like he's looking at me. His head is tilted slightly towards me, but he's sitting straight the fuck up. And it's not even that he was sitting up completely. That's not really like, obviously that scared the shit out of me. If they're not in a bag, we put a sheet over them. But the sheet was at his waist. So the sheet is sitting down here. Like this motherfucker sat up in the middle of the night. Because it kind of like threw me back a little bit. I'm like, no, he's definitely dead. A lot of people that don't know about death, however you pass away, like whatever form you're in, if rigor mortis sets in, you're stuck like that. You're not moving. You gotta break something to move it. So a lot of the times, if you're in a weird configuration, we gotta use all of our strength to maneuver your body. And sometimes it's almost impossible to even get you undressed, to get you to lay flat. Because a lot of them, they're like this far, they're back off the bed. Because some people, you know, when you're laying down, you're not completely horizontal. Anyways, but he died of natural causes. He was very old. He had a very good life. Okay. Alright everybody, that dreadful time has come and gone again. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do. It's all up to you.